Welcome to our episode of This Old Ship. I'm your host, Ron Frankowski. Today we'll be getting paint and primer all over in our hair and in our nose.
My name's George Amendola, and this is my 24th year coming to the Slater. Funny, I was in New York on business, and I was going over to New Jersey to meet some folks. And as I was driving up the west side, getting just past the Intrepid, on my way to the George Washington Bridge, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a silhouette. I said, my God, it's the USS HUSE. The exact same silhouette. I said, well, we've got to stop and see this on the way back. On the way back, and it was a Saturday, and it was tourist time, got a parking spot, and they had it all fenced off. Talked to one of the fellas that was a volunteer at the Intrepid, told him I had served on one like it, and if I could get to see it. And he said, yeah, go ahead. So I got through the gate, walked down the pier, was coming across the after gangway. This old World War II bosun's mate yells at me, where are you going? Not exactly those words, but essentially enough. I told him, I said, fellas, long story short, I looked at this ship at that time and I said, they got to be kidding. This thing is in such bad shape. Not in those exact words, but they'll never get this thing restored. I mean, you walked on the deck, the main deck, and the steel was soft. And he told me, he says, be careful, don't step through it. That's how bad it was. Well, I came up again a year or so later, and I worked on it a couple of days. And then, of course, I had to go back home. 2000, my ship's association, the USS HUSE, we came to Albany for the Desser reunion, and we visited the Slater then. Vastly improved. And I inquired about having work weeks for my ship's association. And they jumped on it. Well, not exactly, but yeah. And there was a group from Michigan, Desser, that was already doing that. So we arranged it and we followed them. A week after they left, we came on board and we'd finish up what they had started and start new projects. And that was, the first year was, I think, 2001. We shipped up about, I guess about 30, 40 people at the time. But of course, over the years, they were not youngsters at the time, and we've lost them all. But we never refused anybody that wanted to join us. We accepted it. Women, men, boys, whoever. And now that I'm probably the last one of Doug Streeter is the last one that served aboard the USS HUSE, but he's younger. He's only in his 70s. And now we've got folks, we still call it the HUSE work week, and we've got 20 some odd people today. Some of them have served in the military, the Army, Navy, Marines, and some never served at all, but they find a mission with the ship. And the news coordinator for it, who's taking over from me, is doing a hell of a good job. Never been in the military, but he's a fine, fine young man, very intelligent, and I'm very proud of him. I keep coming back. Well, the first time I stepped aboard that ship in New York City, it was like I was 17 years old all over again. And each year it comes back. Of course, now it's getting a little harder to remember. It's harder getting up and down the ladders. The steel decks are much harder on my feet. But I come back because it's a worthwhile project. This is the last ship of its type afloat in the United States. There'll never be another destroyer escort. I liken it to the USS Constitution, the last sailing, fighting American ship that's still an active U.S. ship, which is in Boston. One cousin was a combat engineer. He's gone now. He's much older than myself. He was in the landings in North Africa, and he went from North Africa to Sicily. And then from Sicily, he said he went to Anzio, invasion there. And then they had, at that time, they caught up to the fact that he had enlisted underage and sent him back home. By the time he got back and all was said and done, he got drafted. Another cousin that fought the Pacific that was wounded very badly, but he survived. He's also gone now. And then an aunt, through marriage, her brother, Gerard Graham, and I vaguely remember when they brought his body back from Europe. He was a navigator. I forget, was it a navigator or a bombardier on B-17s. His plane got shot down over Germany, and they bailed out. And the story I got, and I was very young at the time, but what I remember was the German people killed them when they got on the ground, and the only one that survived was the pilot because he was the last one out, and he survived because the German soldiers got to him before the civilians population did, and he survived. And after the war, they found Gerard Graham's grave and brought him back home. And he was maybe 20 years old at the time. Well, I started out, never trust the recruiter or the personnel man. I wanted to be an electronics tech or a fire controlman, and but while I was told my scores were high enough, I didn't make the cut. But if I went to the fleet, I was assured a position in the next school. He said, "All right, what kind of ship you want?" And we went through it, and I said, "Oh, cruiser." And he said, "Okay, what's your home port?" I said, "Well, I've never been out of Brooklyn. I mean, go to California. I see the rest of the country." "Right, cruiser, California, no problem. When you get aboard the ship, see the education officer, tell me you want to put in for that school, no problem." My orders came in, I got a destroyer escort out of Newport, Rhode Island. By the time I caught up to my ship, and I found who the education officer was, well, he wore about 4 hats. He was the gunnery officer, he was the deck officer, he was the educational officer, he was a whole bunch of things. When I told him I wanted to put in for the school, he looked at me and laughed. And that's when the light bulb went off, and that was the beginning of my education. I worked on the deck for a while, and eventually I did become a fire controlman. They were very short-handed, and one morning the gunnery officer, who was also fire control deck, said, "I'm going to make you a fire controlman." I said, "Really?" By that time, I didn't have enough time where they would send me to school. But I became a fire controlman. That was it. I'm not sure if I ever was a fire controlman. As I said earlier, these ships, there are no more. You're keeping history alive. You're keeping alive the sacrifices of those young men in World War II. And those young men were not different from me in age-wise, 17 to 20 years old, away from home for the first time.